We're on a road to nowhere. Come on inside. Taking that ride to nowhere. We'll take that ride. I'm feeling okay this morning. And you know, we're on the road to paradise. Here we go, here we go. There's a city in my mind. Come along and take that ride, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. And it's very far away, but it's growing day by day, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. Would you like to come along, and you can help me sing this song, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. There's a city in my mind. Come along and take that ride, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. And it's very far away, but it's growing day by day. It's alright, baby, it's alright. They could tell you what to do, but they'll make a fool of you, and it's alright, baby, it's alright.
Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in for the Unruly Hour. I cannot, excuse my language, but I cannot fucking believe the honor I have tonight. So I am being joined by the incredible human rights lawyer and activist, Mr. Stephen Donziger. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is truly an honor.
Well, the honor is mine. I really appreciate the invitation, and I admire your work, and I'm so happy to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much. And thank you to my dear friend, Marianne Williamson, who hooked us up. So there's so much to talk about. Oh my gosh, you have been through, like, especially lately, this is getting even more and more chaotic. Just let's say people have been, completely unaware of what's going on, which I doubt with my audience, but just in case. So you are mainly known for taking on Chevron, specifically for the Ecuadorian indigenous peoples. Over 300,000 farmers and indigenous Ecuadorians filed with you a lawsuit against Chevron because of what they've done to their environment and their water. So I guess my first, question is, how did you get involved in this? Because I know it was like years and years ago that you've been fighting for this.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm so happy to share the story. Before we get into it, I want to just say this is an epic battle involving lots of people. It's not my case. It's a case of the communities in Ecuador. I'm happy and honored to be able to help them. And also, if people do want to help them and help their lawyers, we have a website. You can learn more about this. Just go to freedonziger.com. You can also give to our defense fund or just sign up. But we want to get as many people enlisted as possible. So I want to say that at the outset. If you want to get more involved, go to freedonziger.com. Now, in terms of the story, I got involved. I was a lawyer just out of law school in the early 90s, and I was asked by some Ecuadorian lawyers to go with them to investigate this environmental catastrophe that we have been told about in the Amazon. We went down for a week, looked at it, talked to people, documented chemical sampling results and oil spills and the like, and really came to the conclusion that what Texaco, now Chevron, had done in Ecuador was probably the world's worst oil-related disaster. Even worse, the environmental damage had been done deliberately, meaning Texaco, as part of its engineering plan, basically systematically dumped millions of gallons of cancer-causing oil waste onto indigenous ancestral lands, into waterways, over a 25-year period from the 70s into the 80s into the 90s. The net result is that the indigenous peoples have been decimated. Many people have contracted diseases, including cancers. Many have died. What Chevron did kills people. It's still killing people, even though they left the country, because they abandoned about 1,000 open air oil waste pits that have pipes running out of the sides into rivers and streams that the indigenous peoples use for their drinking water. So, I believe Chevron caused a deliberate mass poisoning of the Amazon in this area. And it still exists today, and they're refusing to deal with it. They're refusing to comply with court decisions that they pay money into a cleanup fund. And then the result is many people continue to suffer and die. And what's really sad is if you look at the amount of money that Chevron owes for this, it's about $10 billion. By contrast, BP, for its Gulf of Mexico spill in 2010, has paid out $70 billion in damages and fines and compensation to those it harmed. Chevron has yet to pay the first dollar to the people of Ecuador, who arguably have suffered far greater environmental and economic impacts than anyone in the Gulf Coast region of the United States. So we have a real problem, and that's the problem I've been trying to help the people of Ecuador address now for 28 years.
Wow. And Chevron, I did look up their net worth as of today. It's only 248 billion. So, chances are, since they owe 10 billion, they still have a lot left over. So why do you think they're not paying? Why do you think that they'd rather just say, you know what, we will continue to be the bad guys instead of just settling this? And, do you think it's because they don't want to admit culpability?
I think it boils down, look, Chevron's a corporation. They operate in the language and currency of money. And the bottom line is if they feel they can get away with it, they don't want to pay the judgment they owe the people of Ecuador. I mean, that's the bottom line. They have calculated, I don't know if this is true, but they believe it is, that it is cheaper to pay dozens of law firms and literally 2,000 lawyers, because that's what they have on this case, than it is to pay what they owe to the people they poisoned in Ecuador. And I think that's a tragedy. And I think that's cynical. And I also think it's a bad economic calculation when you count all the reputational damage and lost investment opportunity that Chevron is facing due to its failure to abide by the law in Ecuador. But that is their decision, and it's necessitated that the indigenous peoples of Ecuador hire lawyers and literally spend years trying to chase Chevron around the world to get them to pay a judgment out of a court system where they insisted the trial be held and where they accepted jurisdiction. That is the court system of Ecuador. I'll remind people that the judgment against Chevron has been affirmed by 6 different appellate courts, 28 different appellate judges, the Supreme Courts of both Ecuador and Canada, for enforcement purposes. So when Chevron tries to claim they got screwed down in Ecuador or they had their due process rights violated, multiple courts have determined that that is not true. And it's really being used for, propagandistic purposes by the company to try to distract attention from the fact it owes the people of Ecuador a $10 billion liability after committing what is essentially an environmental and human rights atrocity in the Amazon.
Absolutely, without question. And how do you get over 300,000 people? Was it kind of like a petition in the beginning?
Well, to be clear, it wasn't 300,000, it was 30,000. So,
or excuse me, 30,000.
Okay. It's still a lot of people, though.
It is.
And your question is still a good one, and basically what happens is it's a class action case. So we initially signed on as lawyers approximately 75 to 100 what's called representative plaintiffs, that people who have claims, and then we apply for a class action type of status under Ecuadorian law. So those individuals represent similarly situated people also harmed by Chevron's pollution, and that's how you get 30,000 people really quickly. They don't all sign up individually. You have a much smaller number sign up as class representatives, and they represent the interests of everybody affected, which can be tens of thousands of people.
And do the Ecuadorian indigenous peoples feel that this is, I don't want to say, do they feel it's an adequate compensation given everything?
No, they do not. And there's two problems. One is the amount of money, which frankly, while it seems like a lot, is really relatively modest compared to the magnitude of the damage. I mean, it really would cost tens of billions of dollars to clean up this mass dump. Remember, this was not a spill. This was an engineering design to save money. So what that meant is, it's not like, oh, on one day, like BP spill in the Gulf, there was an accident and this well was like spewing out oil into the Gulf of Mexico, and it looked disgusting and it lasted for many, many weeks. This happened every day for 25 years. 4 million gallons of benzene-laden, cancer-causing oil wastewater was run from these big industrial pipes into rivers and streams without telling the people what it was. And it was scalding hot. It was poisonous. But if you looked at it physically, it was clear. Like it wasn't dirty. Well, I mean, it was dirty, but it didn't look dirty. And it would go into the rivers and streams, and there was no warning, and the people didn't know that their water sources were being poisoned. Remember, the people in this area historically don't have money. They live off the forest. They live prosperous lives. I'll remind people that in the Amazon, it is possible to be very wealthy and not have money. That's what the lifestyle was. People had everything they needed: food, shelter, fish, animals, medicines. It was a lot, it was their culture. And in a few short years, Chevron poisoned the whole thing. So they don't have money to buy bottled water. They don't have faucets. They don't have plumbing as we know it in the North. And as a result, these communities have been absolutely devastated to have their water supplies basically become sources of death. I mean, it'd be like you go into your kitchen, turn on the faucet to try to get some water, and like it's your only water source. So you have to choose between like basically being really thirsty and dying of thirst or drinking poison. That's the choice Chevron gave the people in this region of Ecuador.
Right. You sent me some incredibly powerful photos, and I picked some that I really wanted to share. I do want to give a trigger warning. There is one with animals, but I think they're just so powerful and they need to be seen. This one really just, like, there's a little kid right next to an oil barrel. And this is happening in so many of those photos.
Yeah.
It's truly mind-boggling. Like, this is their norm.
Yeah. I mean, I lost a lot of friends down there to cancer. And this little girl, that water she's drinking out of that glass is most likely full of heavy metals and oil contaminants. Right. That blue bucket behind them, I don't know if they use that. They might use that to capture rainwater because they can't get clean water anywhere else.
Oh, right.
But even the rainwater is suspect because the pollution goes into the air via gas flaring, which is puts cancer-causing dioxins into the air. And when that's sort of at its peak and it rains, the rain comes down with black soot in it. So even if the people try to capture rainwater as a water source, it's often very contaminated alongside the rivers and the streams.
Wow.
It's called the Amazon Chernobyl.
Oh.
And
wow.
It's kind of funny, Chernobyl, right? I mean, people are talking about Chernobyl today because Putin's forces just captured Chernobyl in the Ukraine. People who are too young might not know that was the worst nuclear accident in world history. I mean, you have a whole area of the Ukraine in the center of this nuclear power plant that melted down that is completely poisoned, and you can't go there without being exposed to massive doses of radiation still. This happened, I think, in the late 1980s. So people or scientists have called what Chevron did to Ecuador the Amazon Chernobyl. And what that is meant to convey is this is the world's worst oil related contamination on Earth. And it's, again, it was unfortunately done deliberately. It was not an accident.
Absolutely. This picture is, and people should keep in mind that, in a lot of these photos, people weren't wearing shoes, or if they did have shoes, they were very thin, almost maybe like handmade, out of, things they found around like wood or what have you. So people were stepping in this.
Well, this picture is very interesting. This is an old waste pit. Chevron left about 1,000 of these in the jungle. And they're full of oil waste, and many of them have pipes running out the side to drain the contents into the nearby streams. And the waste pits were kind of built on higher ground so that they could drain via gravity down to water sources. And that pit was probably built in the 1970s, so it's 50 years old, and it's all still there. Oil does not biodegrade. It is out there. It will never go away, and it will continue polluting until it's cleaned up. So you see that what you saw in that picture reflected 1,000 times throughout this affected area, unfortunately.
Wow. Let's see, this is a little girl who stuck a stick in the water, and then this is just what pulled out when she lifted the stick up. So,
yeah,
kids are playing in this.
It almost looks like what fudge would look like before it hardens, It's that level of thickness and gooey, but it's oil.
Right.
And, why is this little girl doing that? I mean, it's an open pit. And also, people don't know what this really does to you.
Right.
Their animals often go into the pits and get stuck, and they asphyxiate. They get asphyxiated because they can't get out. Getting near that stuff is dangerous. Breathing the vapors is very harmful. So, that picture of that girl is disturbing, but you see that a lot down there. I mean, it's pretty shocking. Chevron left all these pits. Chevron left all these pits. They didn't even put fences around them.
I was just going to say
there's no signs up saying these are hazardous waste sites.
Incredible.
No signs.
This is I believe it could be like an egret. I took a screenshot from a video. It was having trouble keeping its head up. I'm not sure if it had died or if it was just weighed down from the oil. But you also sent me a video with a snake who, went in the water and then just got stuck. So this is, it's happening to many of the animals there. And that's not exactly, without being crass, I mean, that's not exactly a quick death. It's very inhumane. This is a gentleman who is showing some of the effects of what it's doing to his skin. One of the things I wanted to ask you as far as this is, do the Ecuadorian indigenous peoples have the ability to, go to doctors or such to the point that they were able to kind of treat what was happening to them, or was it just going to exacerbate regardless of what happened?
Well, many have no way to access doctors. I mean, first of all, in the Amazon, there's hardly any doctors at all. And the few that exist in a couple of towns. And if you live out really into the jungle where many people live, it's virtually impossible to access medical care. Remember, historically, the people had medical care through medicines in the plant and animal life in the forest. And the shamans understood what was needed for what ailment. And people to this day, but really back when I first started going down there in the 90s, were living 90, 100 years. I mean, it was a very healthy lifestyle. The word cancer was not even in the language, the native language of the indigenous peoples, until Texaco and Chevron showed up. So some people can get access to medical care, but it's very, very limited in that part of Ecuador.
Do you think that there is some aspect of eugenics in all of this?
What do you mean by that question?
Like, do you think that, like, okay, so let's take something like Flint. It's kind of like eugenics of the poor. It's affecting the poorest, and of course, many are people of color, and it seems like environmental things like this also are affecting the poor and people of color. Do you think that it is that way on purpose?
Well, I think it is a reflection of a phenomenon that many call environmental racism. That's for sure. In other words, the worst environmental practices often take place in the poorest communities, often communities of color, in this case, indigenous peoples. You see this all over the United States and really in many places around the world. I mean, for example, Chevron has a refinery in Richmond, California, which is a low-income, diverse, mostly minority community across the bay from San Francisco. And there's like a massive polluting, cancer-causing, like mega gross industrial site where oil is refined, like right in the middle of an urban area. It's crazy. And the level of asthma in that town because of the pollution from Chevron's refinery is off the charts. There was a fire there 10 years ago. 15,000 people had to get medical treatment. 15,000 for breathing, toxic vapors. So that's an example of environmental racism, in my view. And I think what is happening here in Ecuador is another example. And I think people need to sort of look at it through that frame to understand why certain communities in our society pay a much higher cost for environmental damage than others.
Yeah, absolutely. The other photo I wanted to show, I am not sure why, but this one just really, really hit me the most. Do you know a story about this person, or?
I don't. I might be able. I don't know where that photo came. It might have come from Lou DeMatteis's book, in which case it's probably documented. I do not know this woman or her story, but I will say that this is a typical campesina, that is someone who farms the land in this area. The people who brought the lawsuit, by the way, just so people understand, are some of them are indigenous groups, indigenous peoples with their own native cultures and languages, and others are what are called mestizos, that is, people of mixed ancestry who have moved down to the Amazon from other parts of Ecuador to take land plots and farm. But they're all united in terms of suing Chevron for damages. And they're all part of the class of people in the lawsuit, but they're different groups and they have somewhat different needs, although the health is all impacted in roughly the same way.
That is incredible. Do they anticipate? Well, let's start with you. Do you anticipate Chevron paying any of the money that they owe? I know they haven't paid a dime yet. What do you think it's going to take?
Well, 2 points. One is, even though they haven't paid yet, they've lost the case. And I think it's very important for people to understand that the indigenous communities won the case. It's historic. This kind of thing has never happened before. in this kind of case. And I think that needs to be celebrated and appreciated, because the groups that did the case, and I was lucky enough or honored enough to be one of the lawyers representing them, achieved something that the world has never seen before. Like, they kicked Chevron's ass in an 8-year trial. And that's really important to recognize. The reason I'm being attacked, and I don't know if you mentioned this, but I'm right now in house arrest in this, what I would call a bogus contempt case, misdemeanor case. I'm the only lawyer ever locked up for what I supposedly did, and I assert my innocence. But beyond that, the reason I'm being attacked is because of the success of my clients and because of the success of our legal team. Now, will Chevron pay? I hope so. They will pay when they are forced by a court to pay under threat of seizure of their assets. And, they're fighting tooth and nail. They have 60 law firms, 2,000 lawyers. If they spent half the money they've spent on legal fees to clean up, a lot of lives would have been saved. So, they wouldn't be spending this money if they didn't feel risk. They feel risk. There is risk. And I think ultimately they are going to have to pay the full amount of the judgment.
Yeah, I totally agree. What's that?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
I usually talk a lot, so that's very unusual. I did not say anything.
As far as legality, I mean, you have been through it. And most recently, we're seeing even, Biden is interacting with people and working with people who have done you dirty and who are connected to Chevron. So this goes really deep. It started in 2011, I believe, when they kind of started having it out for you, Chevron.
They started targeting me in a civil lawsuit where they sued me for $60 billion, not million, billion. I got sued for the most money of any individual in American history. And I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. I'm a human rights lawyer. I'm not a man of great means. To be sued for 1 million would be absurd. To be sued for 60 billion. I mean, I kind of wear that as a badge of honor, I guess. There's no other way to look at it.
I mean, they think you're worth that. That's kind of awesome.
Look, you gotta be effective at something if you get an oil company to sue you for $60 billion. So I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, totally. And then they tried to, initially what started the house arrest was because they tried to seize your electronics because they thought you were hiding money.
Yeah.
From what? Like, where did they think you got money? That's what I don't understand.
Well, I don't think they actually thought I had money. In my opinion, they used that as a pretext to get my privileged information so they can understand what our legal team was planning to do to seize their assets. It was a pretext. But they came up with this theory that I had raised all this money, was storing it and hiding it and enriching myself and not using it on the case, which is totally false. By the way, I don't have any money. You should know that. Chevron took all my money. The judge who they sued in front of ordered me to pay their legal fees, millions of dollars. So whatever money I had saved, they took. I'm broke. I'm basically dependent on my legal defense fund to survive. Plus, my wife, Laura Miller, works. We have a 15-year-old son, and we get by in the lifestyle, the pretty humble lifestyle that we have. But I have no money. But they came up with this theory that I was hiding money, and they tried to use that as an excuse to get my electronic devices so they could get the privileged information, see what my communications were with lawyers around the world who were planning to go try to seize their assets. That's what they really wanted. And when I refused to give them my electronics, because I have ethical duties to my clients not to disclose privileged information, especially information that could literally lead to their death or bodily harm. When they did that, the judge who ordered me to turn it over to Chevron, who, by the way, used to work for the tobacco industry, charged me with criminal contempt of court and had me locked up. By the way, my criminal case, the regular federal prosecutor in Manhattan refused to prosecute it. So the judge appointed a private firm to prosecute me. The firm had Chevron as a client. So essentially, I'm being prosecuted and deprived of my liberty by Chevron. It's scary. It's never happened before in American history, a corporate prosecution by a fossil fuel company against its main critic and adversary. It's really scary, and it violates the rule of law, and it violates the Constitution, and in my opinion. And already the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has ruled my detention illegal and has ordered the U.S. government to release me and pay me compensation. But of course, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, and Joe Biden, they haven't done anything. They've ignored that order from the United Nations. So we have the weird phenomenon of a successful American human rights lawyer being locked up in his own home in his own country for almost 3 years. And, the United States government and the State Department is always criticizing other countries for locking up lawyers, like Erdogan in Turkey and Orban in Hungary and China and Russia and Putin. It's happening right here, and they're doing nothing.
Yep, absolutely. And you're right that it's scary, because the amount of hubris they must have to knowingly have someone who works with Chevron be the one prosecuting you and having that information available to everyone, and not being, trepidatious of that fact. That's pretty scary.
Look, corporations or any private party should not be allowed to publicly prosecute anybody for any reason. I mean, what is that all about? But trust me, that is the Chevron playbook. It's the fossil fuel industry playbook, to go after lawyers and activists who are challenging that industry, which is an industry that is very clearly destroying our planet. And if you're too successful, this is sort of the warning shot across the bow, is my case. So my case goes way beyond me. It really goes to what kind of society we want to live in. I'm being used as a weapon of mass intimidation against lawyers and activists who want to do this work. I know it. I talk about it a lot. I've had a heck of a lot of support. 68 Nobel laureates and 11 congresspersons and the like have spoken out about this. So, if they want to build me into this symbol of something, I'm going to use the platform to talk about it and basically call it out and help people deal with it, because there really should never be another corporate criminal prosecution ever in this country or any rule of law country. And I'll add that my case is under appeal right now, and I hope it gets reversed. But I will say that the 3-judge appellate court panel that heard my appeal, all the 3 judges were appointed by President Trump. So I'm not terribly hopeful.
Well, this was, I got so excited when I saw this tweet. If you could read that. And then what happened so shortly after was not exciting. Can you read this?
Oh, okay. It says breaking the ankle bracelet. I wear an ankle bracelet where they monitor my location on a 24/7 basis. So I say the ankle bracelet has been hacked off and I'm heading home. This black claw was both a real and symbolic taking by Chevron of my freedom and peace of mind for 913 days. Outrageous in the extreme. Full release coming on April 25th. I'm thrilled.
I was so excited, like so many others. And then, do you want to explain what happened a few days after?
A few days later, they called me back in and put it back on, and also locked me up for another 5 days in a halfway house, which is like a locked apartment building here in New York in the Bronx. The windows wouldn't open. They wouldn't let me outside. I didn't get fresh air for 5 days.
And what was their?
I think it was just retaliation. I mean,
I'm sure.
I think they.
What did they tell you it was for?
Well, they told me it was because I was outside my apartment. I was not authorized to be outside my apartment, although I was in my own building. That's what they claimed it was for. But in my opinion, it was retaliation. And look, let me be clear. My entire detention is illegal.
Yeah.
So, this is sort of how the carceral system works in America. Whether you're guilty or not, they put you in these systems, and they, like in my case, they let me go home, but I'm under such tight monitoring, I can barely sneeze without violating some rule. And then they can use those violations of these really narrow, very trivial rules to send you back to prison. It's impossible not to violate their rules, at least on occasion, even by accident. And I've been getting calls all hours of the night to wake me up. They put a special phone in my house, and they can call me at any time and demand I send a selfie to their computer. It's called a biometric check-in.
Wow.
And I got a call at 5:15 this morning. I've been sleep deprived for weeks. I mean, I cannot get a full night's sleep. It's look, it's a method that interrogators in Guantanamo post 9/11 used to torture people with sleep deprivation. And I'm not saying that's how they're thinking, but the way the system is set up, it's the effect of what actually happens. One night I got a call at 11, 1 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 7. I couldn't sleep for more than an hour, and you just can't go back to sleep. Then you walk around like a zombie all day and you can't work because you can't even concentrate. So, yeah, I mean, being on home confinement under this type of carceral system with an ankle bracelet is really part of an expanding surveillance state in this country. Yeah. And it's also big business. I mean, the company that has the contract to do the ankle bracelets is owned by the former Wackenhut, which I don't know if people know what Wackenhut. It's like a private security company, most famous, frankly, for smashing strikers in Chicago in the Haymarket riots, which ended up creating, Workers' Day on May 1st all over the world. That was Wackenhut. Okay, they're now in a private prison business, and they have contracts to run these halfway houses and do the electronic monitoring. They make billions of dollars.
Wow.
And every person they have on electronic monitoring, they have a contract with ICE. They're going to have 400,000 immigrants on electronic monitoring who are waiting for their asylum applications to be processed. I mean, it's big money. And there's a huge economic incentive to exploit people who are in the prison system, which essentially means that there's a need to keep bringing bodies back into the system, which in my mind explains why the federal prison system has a 65% recidivism rate. It's a failed system, according to its own goals. But it's a perfectly logical system if you sort of look beneath the covers and understand that it really is about business.
Absolutely.
It's about really
everything is about money.
monetizing social control. And I'm looking at it because I'm living it. It's wild.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be flip about it. It's very unpleasant.
I digress a bit, but when you speak on immigrants, as someone who's very environmentally conscientious, obviously, we talk about climate change all of the time and environment, but something that I noticed not a lot of people really discuss is climate refugees. And, our water is getting worse, and not just in Flint, the air. I mean, it's happening all over, even in our country. What do you foresee happening in the future as far as climate refugees? I mean, we already have so many food deserts, things like that. What do you think is going to happen, in the near future?
Well, I mean, we're at a tipping point, and the reality is we're not going to be able to come back from the disaster that will befall the earth unless we make some radical changes in the next few years. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, the climate refugees are just one byproduct of that. People dying of cancer in Ecuador's Amazon is another byproduct. Me being locked up is another byproduct, right? I mean, I'm playing my small role as a lawyer, trying to hold a major polluter accountable for violations of the law that are killing people, but that are also destroying our planet. I mean, that gas flaring and leaving the pollution accelerates the destruction of the earth. And of course, all the oil taken out of the ground that led to that pollution ends up in gas tanks and cars, mostly in California, which leads to more pollution, which leads to, more acceleration of planetary destruction. So it's all connected. What we need to understand is if you sort of lock up the frontline defenders of the earth, who, by the way, are mostly indigenous peoples, 470 million indigenous peoples around the world, and 80% of resource extraction takes place on indigenous lands. And then you have non-indigenous people like me who joined the movement and tried to help. But you start locking the frontline defenders up and their lawyers, you see the stakes are really high. And this is why, it's just so aggravating about Joe Biden. That you sit here, he acts like he has a climate plan and, he's pro-environment and dealing with all these problems. And, here I am. It's like, hi, I'm in Manhattan. I'm a human rights lawyer trying to do my little part. And I've been detained for almost 3 years in a private Chevron prosecution. Sir, can you do something about that? I'm not asking you to like me. I'm not asking you to agree with me. What I am asking is that the rule of law be applied to my case and I be prosecuted by the Department of Justice, not by Chevron. That's what I'm asking.
Absolutely. I just put this on the screen. You tweeted this out today. Do you want to read this? This is big
Sure.
news.
This is actually from yesterday. So it says, breaking 10 prominent lawyers just wrote President Biden demanding he pardon me given the clear illegality of my Chevron orchestrated private prosecution and 932-day detention. The United Nations ruled my detention is illegal. Biden must act now. So that's a pardon letter signed by 10 lawyers. I mean, really, Marty Garbus, who's a legendary civil rights lawyer, Mike Tiger, professor at Duke, Nathalie Segovia, who's probably the leading indigenous rights lawyer in the United States now. She did a lot of work at Standing Rock. Who else? Scott Badenoch, who's a high-level environmental person at the American Bar Association. I mean, some real heavyweights have signed this letter to Biden. Ron Kuby, who used to work with Bill Kunstler. I mean, so Biden needs to deal with this, and we're demanding that he pardon me just because of the obvious illegality of the prosecution by Chevron, and also because the United Nations, that is 5 respected international jurists who looked at this, concluded that the judges in Chevron violated multiple provisions of international law in prosecuting me and locking me up the way they did. So, we need to get back in conformity with international law. Kind of ironic given how Biden keeps citing international law to criticize Putin's clearly illegal invasion of the Ukraine. But here, again, in my case, where independent jurists have determined that my rights have been violated by judges in our country, and Chevron, he does nothing.
Right. Absolutely. And let's say Biden does actually do one good thing and pardon you, which we hope for. What do you think would happen at that point? Do you think Chevron would still, there would still be any kind of ramifications for you for any other legalities or anything like that?
Well, I think Chevron will try to explore whatever it can to try to hurt me because they're so scared of me and scared of the work I do. So I don't think it's going to end when my sentence ends. I think they're going to still try to come after me, and I have a legal team and we'll deal with it. The more they come after me, the more I think they expose themselves at this point. I think it's really counterproductive for them, but I don't think they have the ability to take the foot off the gas. I mean, they just sort of operate at full speed all the time, thinking I'm going to go away or be intimidated. I'm not. The more they attack, the more I'm going to fight. I think it hurts them. I think there's a shareholder revolt within Chevron. There's resolutions that are getting massive amounts of support. Management has lost control of their shareholders on this issue. And, if they want to continue to go down that road, I think there's a lot of risk for them. And, I'll do what I can to protect myself and my clients, obviously.
Well, interestingly enough that you mentioned that, when I was looking up their net worth, something came up. It was a big picture, and it says March 1st, National Chevron. What was the word you used? That they're losing a lot of their I just went blank. Shareholders. They're having a National Shareholders Day on March 1st. So that should be exciting. Maybe they'll get some more.
So do you mean their annual shareholder meeting? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. It should be interesting. I'm going to be watching to see.
Yeah. So every year. Yeah. Every year of that meeting. I'm saying these public companies every year are obligated by law to have a public shareholder meeting. So if you own one share, you can go to the meeting and speak about what concerns you to management. So for years, the Ecuadorians and their lawyers and their representatives, not me, I've never actually been, but they show up and they raise hell and confront the CEO with the fact that he is complicit in human rights violations and environmental atrocities. And every year they just blow it off, ignore it. They blame the people for poor hygiene, which is totally racist. They blame the government of Ecuador. They say you should talk to your own government. This is so wrong, given that Chevron alone dumped the toxic waste, not Ecuador's government. So there's this constant denial of reality by Chevron management that really sickens me, frankly, to watch. And by the way, the Chevron CEO, his name is Michael Worth. Between his salary and stock last year, he made over $60 million. $60 million. While 30,000 people in Ecuador's Amazon are essentially either dying of cancer or will face exposures that will make them sick or potentially kill them. He made $60 million in 1 year.
Wow. That is disgusting. Do you think if I tried to get into that meeting that I could do so virtually? Just asking.
They don't let recording equipment in, but you should still. No, you should still go. Buy a share and go.
I'm not in New York. So I'm wondering if they would.
No. I'm saying you could go to the meeting if you're a shareholder.
Yeah.
Hello?
I want to see what I can do.
You could go to the meeting if you want.
I like to.
I'm not encouraging it one way or the other. I'm steering clear of that, but anyone who has a share can go. I'm not going.
I did see a post, and it's not funny, but it's almost humorous in the respect of being so incredibly just ridiculous. I saw it today. I'm not sure when you posted it, but I saw it on your Twitter. Like, can you read that?
As it poisons indigenous peoples in Ecuador's Amazon, Chevron now claims it is using animal shit to create renewables. Please. Chevron is a major human rights violator, and no amount of animal dung can cover it up. Pay what you owe to the people of Ecuador. And that's sort of a quote tweet off of a Chevron tweet where they say, working with partners, we're using the methane from animal dung or animal poop to create renewable natural gas. Can you guess which animal? I mean, come on. I mean, the greenwashing is so ridiculous. I mean, they think we're stupid or something. I mean, they dump 16 billion gallons of cancer-causing waste in the Amazon, and they act like they're, into renewables. Come on.
Right. Like you sent me that photo reel of tons of animals who have died from what they've done. But we're supposed to think that you are using animals to help the environment when in fact it's the other way around. That is so completely egregious.
Yeah.
Wow. So what now? I also saw on your Twitter you're going to be talking to people in the Czech Republic tomorrow.
So yeah, that unfortunately got postponed because of the invasion of the Ukraine. So I think that's going to be next week now. But Amnesty International in the Czech Republic invited me to talk to them about the case and stuff, and I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, the Japan chapter of Amnesty has also invited me. There's a huge amount of interest around the world in understanding what has happened in Ecuador, what has happened to me. I think people are shocked to see that the United States, again, is locking up a human rights lawyer, and they want to talk to me and understand the story.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to ask you this question, and I don't mean it to be like, defeatist, but given everything you're going through, is the power of the people stronger than the people in power?
I believe it is. The challenge is to organize it, harness it, leverage it. But it's definitely there. We organized it, harnessed it, and leveraged it down in Ecuador, and look what it resulted. We had got a historic $10 billion pollution judgment. People had no money or power in the traditional sense. They created that leverage through organizing and through some really creative financing approaches and some very tenacious lawyers, and they did it. So yeah, it's possible, but again, you got to organize, harness, leverage, and then go after it. And a lot of people, understandably perhaps, get demoralized by stuff, by the power, our dysfunctional Congress and the power of money over everything in our society, the inequality of wealth, the fact the Supreme Court treats corporations as people and political donations as, speech. I mean, all that stuff has completely distorted our society, in favor of the wealthy, in favor of corporate power. So, the courts no longer, to me, are fair as a general matter. There are fair judges, but generally our federal courts are structured to help the wealthy. And until we organize and really get democracy back and have political electeds represent the majority will, we're going to have a really hard time dealing with this stuff. But again, organize, harness, leverage, go after it. We can do it.
Hell yeah. So who have been some of your inspirations during this fight?
I mean, I think, my biggest inspirations are the folks down in Ecuador who are dealing with it on the front lines. I mean, they're the example. They're the ones really dealing with the impacts. They're the ones who are suffering the most. They're the ones who handle it with the most grace, the most intelligence, the most sophistication, the most determination. So, I've always been humbled by their desire to have me on their team and to help them. But I can say that I've been down there, by the way, over 200 times into the jungle. And,
wow.
I've learned a lot more from people down there than they ever have learned from me. That's for sure. About life, wisdom, the forest, the natural world. I mean, compared to that, the law stuff is kind of technical and easy. That's the hard stuff. So I feel really fortunate. I've been very enriched by having worked on this case, even though obviously I'm going through somewhat of an ordeal right now. But it's been a heck of a journey. And I'm honored again and feel fortunate and blessed to have done what I've done. I don't know how much more time you have on the show, but unfortunately, I'm running out of time.
Oh, that's okay. It's all good. Last question. I just want to ask you about 1881A. Are you familiar with that?
Honestly, I'm not. Can you explain it?
Yes. So basically, it happened in Libby, Montana. There was an environmental crisis, and the town was able to get immediate Medicare full insurance because of it. And Biden has the ability to do an executive order on it, meaning he literally could sign an executive order today to give every single one of us full coverage. And he is not. So I wanted your take on that, on national Medicare for all. What you think it would do for people environmentally who would suddenly have the ability to, go to the doctor and have, medical services from things that have happened to people like in Flint, things like that, actually have the ability and the means to take care of those things.
He should do that. He should sign that order or those executive orders to deal with the health impacts of environmental crises like Flint and, like
Absolutely.
things that are happening all over the place. I mean, the reality is people are being severely harmed by environmental impacts. Sometimes they don't even know it because it's imperceptible. It's little by little in the water they're drinking or the air they're breathing, food they're eating. But absolutely, I mean, let's just start with the national health plan. My golly, every country in the world has one, but us. I mean, come on. So many of our problems in America would be solved if we just gave people basic health care. Health care is a right, should not be a privilege. So I would support that. And I think there's so much President Biden could be doing, things like that, to carry out an agenda that meets the needs of the majority of the people of this country. And unfortunately, he's not moving fast enough on a lot of these issues, including the cancellation of student debt, while we're on the subject. So, President Biden needs to release me, needs to take back the prosecution from Chevron. He needs to sign executive orders so people can be treated medically or have their healthcare needs met when they're victims of environmental contamination. And he needs to fight harder for a real national health plan. But again, he's just a piece of it. Ultimately, the power comes from the people, and it's up to us to really do the organizing, the harnessing, and the leveraging.
You're right. Absolutely. Well, again, it has been an absolute honor. I just cannot thank you enough. This has been, I'm trying not to fangirl. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. This is amazing. And it truly was incredible to meet you.
Well, I am honored to be invited. I admire your work. We got to do this again. I want to also remind people that if you can help, go to freedonziger.com. If you can donate a little bit to our defense fund, we'd appreciate it. We have, by the way, it does take a lot of resources to deal with this monster called Chevron. But even if you can't donate, join up, give us your information. You'll get regular case updates in your email. And just really appreciate the support and the opportunity to share my perspective with your viewers.
Absolutely. Best of luck with everything. I support you. Solidarity with you, the Ecuadorian indigenous peoples, and everyone you work with. It makes a difference, and it's very inspiring. So I thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll hopefully be in touch soon. Good luck with your work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that was amazing. Yeah. Let me start looking at the comments. I was gonna just go off the air then too, but I'm still kind of like, I'm kind of fangirling a little. All right, let's see. Let me see what these comments say, peepees. All right. Damn it. I can't read them, but that was Wow. I gotta tell you guys, I have never been that nervous to do an interview in my fucking life. But I am so excited, and he was so awesome. Oh my god. Okay. Yes. Woo! Score. So thank you so much for watching. I do want to remind you guys that March 11th through 13th, which is a Friday through a Sunday, we're doing 18 hours of panels for National Medicare for All. And it is going to be, we have incredible guests. And we are going to be doing panels on racism, healthcare inequalities, panels on environmental healthcare issues, just you name it. Just tons of panels with incredible guests. So tune in 11th, 12th, 13th. We'll be announcing some of the guests. I'll be hosting much of the shows. But it is going to be amazing. So definitely stay tuned for that. We're doing it with M for All, the same people. We did the 56 national events on July 24th last year. And yeah, stay tuned. Also, Saturday night, I will be on Sabby Sab's women's panel. She's having a women's event with 4 different panels, and I will be on Saturday night at 7 p.m. I'll be on the healthcare panel with my dear friend Marianne Williamson, Eleanor Goldfield, Kim Iverson, and I believe that's it. But yeah, so definitely tune in for both days for Sabbies. There's going to be a lot of incredible women, including like Kashama Sawant and some really incredible women who are going to be speaking, and Tara Reid, who I had the privilege of interviewing, and she's wonderful. So tune in to that as well. So I think I'm just babbling now because I'm like on a high. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for watching. Please smash that like button, hit share. And if you are ever so obliged, I do have a Patreon. You can subscribe monthly for as little as $3. It helps me pay for my streaming fees, things like that. I need a new microphone, things like that. But again, thank you so much for watching. You guys are amazing. Much love.